I'm using templates in a slightly different way. The main thing is I'm using a hump mold as my shape. So I'm able to take this this plaster block, and this is from one of those woven wooden salad dishes. Filled it with plaster. And now I've got the ability to build on top of that. But the thing that's different too is that I need to start with a softer slab. So let me pull a slab. It's about the size that I need. Smoothing that surface with the rib, giving a nice blank canvas for the texture. Soft slabs stick to the surface of the sheetrock. So before I do anything with them, I kind of pull them off, release them from the surface, and then they're a little easier to move. They will tear. They're a little harder to work with because of their stickiness. This is just a larger piece of that mat that I had before. So one side, and just a piece of pegboard. And that one has that little belly button texture. And I'll line those up. This is going to have a seam down the center. I'm going to put the imprinted texture overlapping the softer texture. Again, I'll bevel that scored edge. Then I'll just trim that excess off. This is a fettling knife that has just been sharpened a lot. Just hit it with a quick sponge. Get that seam. And the second part of the template, or kind of prefabricated building method for this, is to apply a foot ring and a rim. I intend these shapes to go on the wall, and the way that this foot that I'll apply sits on the base of this piece, a wire can go around that foot and be situated to hang these on the wall. And these rims are an extruded rim. I'll extrude more than I need so that I can cut to fit. I've slipped and scored the underside of the pot, and then I'll slip and score the bottom of the rim. Or I guess in this respect it's the foot. I also like this as a framing device for the texture that I apply to the piece. I've got the foot on the bottom and the rim on the top, and those two things kind of sandwich all of that surface information that's going on the piece itself. And then I can kind of generalize how long I need this coil to be. I'll just go along and press the foot down to the slabs. Again, I'm going to cut these coils in the same way that I cut the slabs. I'm going to give myself a nice beveled lap joint, not a butt joint. So these two surfaces are going to cross over each other. Kind of give a little handshake where they join, so that during shrinkage they don't pull apart from each other. Slip and score those two ends. Seal them up. I'll just wrap a sponge over the rim, and with downward pressure kind of join those two together. Let's come through and seal that edge again. making that little indentation that's going to trap some stuff later on, give a nice visual definition. And then I'll let that sit. Again, plaster, just like the sheetrock, plaster is going to suck that moisture out of the slabs after it's sat for a little while and really kind of stiffened up. I'll put a board on the top side of the foot, flip it over, and then attach the rim when that's gotten its stiffness. So now that this wall plate has set up, leather hard, the foot is nicely stiff. You need to flip this out. You got to be careful with hump molds that you don't leave the piece on the plaster too long, because as the clay shrinks around the plaster, you can get cracking, or you won't be able to remove it. Again, just like the other, get into the bottoms, get your fingernails into the mold and lift that out. It should release. If it doesn't release right away, then you need to let it sit for longer. It's still soft enough though that I can manipulate the clay, putting some of the curves back into it, but I also want to be able to slip and score without it being too stiff. If you let it get too stiff and you put a rim onto the top edge of that slab, as it dries, the rim will be at a different stage, and usually you'll get cracking that will follow its way right around that rim. Again, slipping and scoring. And take one of the extruded rims, score that back edge, getting them for the most part situated as I go around, allowing that rim to kind of sit down into place. Figure out my excess. I always trim a little long just in case I do need to move something. Then I'll come around and pinching, pushing that rim down, listening for the slip to really tell me that it's stuck together. Bevel the one side, figure out how much overlap needs to happen, slip and score those two surfaces, and work that lap joint together. It's probably one of the only joints that I tend to hide, is that little lap joint. I want that rim to be seamless all the way around so that it does frame the information that's inside. And then again, I'll go through with my sponge, applying a little downward pressure, both smoothing the rim as well as adhering it to the piece. And I'll come through with that wood tool, seal up that outer edge, and I'll also come in and hit that inner edge. And then when the rim's on, I can move on to putting in the tacks. These are a little long for the thickness of these slabs. And I don't want these poking through. I found that when I ignored that, as the clay shrinks through the drying process, the nails will poke through from the underside. And then when I'm trying to burnish the terracig later on, I cut my fingers. They almost get sharper as they fire, so I just cut them short. They make these tacks in a couple of different shapes too. You can get staples, kind of loop staples that work really nice. Brass will also fire in. Actually, it'll go to a higher temperature, and you can buff them a little bit and they'll shine up. Cut a couple of handles. Again, I'll use these little loop handles as a reference to some of those pottery traditions. And I'll also place them, usually depending on how these are divided up slab-wise, where the slabs intersect. I'll add that handle. So if I've got 3 slabs on an oval platter, sometimes it'll have 2 or 4 handles. So I can play with that framing device.